Hi, and welcome back. Today I've got some information about forests. How do we manage them? For what purposes do we use forests? And something called deforestation. I did want to start really quickly with just a recap. Forest biomes. So there are different types of forests, right? Tropical rainforest, something called the temperate deciduous forest, etc. So you may want to give a quick review of those biomes. So it says for a quick review of these different, these different biomes, say that. I linked different videos on my YouTube channel in the forest management and deforestation playlist. So if you go to that playlist, there's one from the AP College Board. And if you watch, starting about 5 minutes in to about 20 minutes, so about 15 minutes worth of video, they'll explain tropical rainforests, different types of forests. So check that out for like a little review of forest biomes. Might be a smart idea. All right, but let's start here. Importance. Why do we care about forests? Why are they important? What's particularly important about a forest ecosystem? So why should we care about forests? Just take a minute and think about it. The benefit or the services provided by trees. How do they affect air quality, climate, soil? I put water kind of thinking like if there's a river nearby, how would a forest affect that, or like a lake nearby? How do the trees in a forest affect the animals? What's the interaction there? And if you really just think about those things, you probably already came up with some ideas about why we should care about forests, why forests are important. Right? Then think about humans. How do we benefit from the forest? What do we get from the forest? And it may be economically we benefit or in other ways. If you think about forests just for a couple minutes, why should we care about them? What do they do for us? What do they do for the environment? What do they do for other living things? I suspect you could come up with quite a list. So I put some things here. I found this from the book and I've listed some things. But forests provide what are called ecological services. So things for nature, things for the environment. They support energy flow and chemical cycling, very fancy sounding, but they're a part of a food chain, right? So that will support energy flow. They do photosynthesis, right? Chemical cycling, when leaves fall and die and decompose, they add nutrients to the soil. Plants, trees, they take in carbon dioxide and through photosynthesis make glucose, and they're a part of that energy and matter flow in an ecosystem. They reduce soil erosion. I've got more pictures of that later on, but if the side of a hill, like a slope, has trees on it, they have roots that hold the soil in place, so when it rains and rain goes down that slope, the soil stays in place. The tree roots hold that soil in place. So that's important to prevent landslides and soil erosion. They obviously absorb water, right? Their roots kind of hold that soil in place, and that slows down water like rainwater and kind of lets it absorb. Trees, through something called transpiration, they release water through their needles or their leaves into the air, add like a little humidity. They help to purify water and air. They add oxygen to the air. They take in carbon dioxide. They take in water through their roots and release it in transpiration out of their leaves. They definitely can affect climate. They have a cooling effect, maybe a little humidity. Again, carbon dioxide is taken in from the atmosphere, and through photosynthesis, it's stored in glucose, and then they use glucose to make cellulose and, like the tree trunk and the wood and all the parts of the tree, and that actually stores that carbon for long periods of time until the tree dies. It's a good thing because carbon dioxide in the atmosphere traps heat and can lead to climate change or climate warming. So it's a good thing. And they obviously do provide numerous habitats. So birds live, different spots on the tree. They give squirrels a place to nest. If there's a little, we call a snag, like a hole in a tree, birds can nest in there. So they just provide a lot of places for other living things to survive and fill their niche. They also provide economic services, and this would be to humans. This is why they're important to us. Fuel wood. So in less developed countries, wood is the main source of fuel to heat homes, to cook food, right? So it's their main energy source. We call it fuel wood, just trees, right, that they cut down, burn. It's fuel for them. Lumber would be to build houses, pulp to make paper. So mining might sound a little strange, but many mineral resources are found in forested areas. So that's kind of where that ties in. Livestock grazing, sometimes forests are cut down and grass will grow and you can graze livestock there. Sometimes just interspersed or in the what we call understory of a forest, you find grasses and shrubs that livestock can graze on. Recreation, right? A lot of people like to camp in the forest, hike. And then jobs, there's a lot of jobs in forest management. So it provides services for the environment as well as things that we need. So what is deforestation? You hear that word, but you never really think about what it means. I'm guessing you have. So here is kind of some, I guess, descriptions or definitions. It's cutting down more of the forest than can be replenished. Think of the Lorax, right? The original that we watched. That is deforestation. Cut down all the truffula trees faster than they can be replenished, and before you know it, the forest was gone. It wasn't replaced. Clear cutting. Clear meaning like you clear it all out. You cut everything down faster than it can be replenished. You just cut everything down. Again, sort of like the Lorax. Same concept. You do not leave enough behind to reproduce and keep the forest from like going into the future. So that whole idea of unsustainable, right? You're using things in such a way they're not going to be around for the future. They're not able to reproduce or replenish. Basically, complete destruction of the forest. I mean, you just take the whole thing down. That's deforestation. And I suspect most of you knew that already. I've got some pictures here to drive it home. This is from the textbook. Clear cutting. You clear everything out. You cut it all down. You leave nothing behind. You cut every tree. That's deforestation. Clear cutting. It's gone. And another picture. This was from your textbook, I believe, as well. It's deforestation in Washington State. I thought it was kind of nice because you can see the difference, right? So over here on the right side, all in here, you can see all the trees are gone, whereas on the left side, the forest is still there. We call that clear cutting. You do not leave a single tree behind. It's done. You cut everything down. If those trees are not replenished or replaced, it's a deforested area. This was, I thought, just because it wasn't maybe on a slope, kind of a different kind of picture. It's more of a tropical rainforest. Generally there, it's a slash and burn. They cut all the trees down and then often burn them to grow crops. So I'm not sure if that was the case in this picture, but on the bottom kind of left, you've got a clear cut area. On the right, you can see where the trees, they just keep on going deeper into the forest, cutting them down. So what are the effects? You probably already start thinking like, wow, you cut down those trees, you've ruined habitat for animals, you know, I'm sure some things are going in your head. There's some specific effects that we want to discuss. So I've got this picture that I've already shown you once. So I'll show you this picture. On the left, the forest is still there and there's a river down kind of below. On the right is a hillside that's been clear cut. So you'll see. Kind of just check them out and think about how would having the trees affect the area, including the river? How would removing the trees affect the area, including the river? Here we go. So on the right, on this right side, this is the area where the trees have all been cut down. It used to look like what's on the left. It used to look like that. So this is sort of the, think of this as like the before, and this is the after the trees have been cut down. So, and then we've got the river running kind of right through the middle. So we got the river here, right? Let's think about this. What do the trees do? So for instance, say it rains. It rains. The rainwater would hit the ground, but then as it kind of starts to go down the hill, right, gravity, it would sort of hit tree trunks that have sort of held soil in place, and it would kind of pinball and kind of slow down the water. Well, when the water slows down, it would be absorbed into the soil or taken into the soil, right? Well, if you remove the trees over here on the right, there's absolutely nothing to slow down that rainwater. So now that rainwater just goes much faster, moves more quickly, less of it is absorbed into the soil, and it runs off into the river. So when you deforest or clear cut an area, you can end up with flash flooding. You can end up with more soil erosion because on the right, there are no trees to hold the soil in place. So the water just picks up the soil and would carry it into this river. Also, now this river is clogged with sediment. It's not good for fish. It can fill in all the gravel spaces where the salmon lay their eggs. So it can lead to some negative effects on the river. It can even cloud the river so much sunlight can't get through and algae production would decrease. So that's one effect. Also, just think you've removed all these trees where birds would nest, squirrels would get food. you've definitely altered that habitat. On the left side with the trees, I have a lot more shade, right? It would be a little bit cooler. On the right side, no shade, I would suspect warmer. With the trees, you get carbon dioxide taken in. On the right side, no, that's not happening anymore. Just kind of think about this picture and kind of look at it, like compare, contrast. I already have some ideas. So in the before picture, as we said, there's the trees, that would affect air, climate, the river, the animals. Think about the after. How would that affect the climate, the trees, the river, the animals? There we go. Kind of already did it, so let's do this. So I put it before with the trees. You've got lots of shelter. You've got food for animals. It's probably more cool, moist. The trees are taking in carbon dioxide. They're releasing oxygen. There's nutrients in the trees. When they decompose, that would add nutrients to the soil. This is called a watershed. So when it rains and water hits this slope, that water is going to trickle down into that river. So this land sheds water into that river. So this slope or this side of the hill is called the watershed of the river. So when there are trees, like we said before, those trees would slow down the water, would reduce soil erosion, and help keep the river more clear. And then we said, oh, sorry, I have a picture from the textbook. I thought was kind of nice. Kind of things we've already said. So then after, right, that right side of the picture, we removed all the trees. You remove that shelter for birds and squirrels and the food resources. It's going to be warmer. You're not going to have the intake of carbon dioxide anymore. If you've actually cut the trees and removed them from the forest, all of the nutrients from the soil that those trees took in is now been taken away. So you might leave the soil depleted. There's nothing to die and decompose and add nutrients to the soil. Like we said, watershed. So the side of the mountain sheds water into the river. Well, now if you remove the trees, you're going to get more soil erosion, which means dirt in the river, right? You're going to get a chance of increased landslides, nothing to hold that soil in place. You're going to get more flooding, nothing to slow down the water. It's just going to super fast down the side of the hill into the river. This one, kind of to remove the trees, threw that one in there. I don't know if anyone would have thought of that, but to remove the trees, you need a machinery, and that would lead to some air pollution. And I added this, remember, like our salmon, right? They really like that cold, clear water. We have soil erosion, soil running into the river. It's not going to be so clean. And without the trees, which have a cooling effect, you may end up with a warmer river. It's out of their range of tolerance. They either die or move out. So deforestation has lots of effects. If you just think maybe chain reaction, if this happens and this happens and this happens, think about climate, think about soil, think about surrounding rivers and lakes, think about habitat for animals. You probably could come up with a lot of things just thinking about it. Again, another picture if that helps. This was from the textbook. Again, I thought, list if you need to go back and study, or you could use the one here. It's all things we've said. All right. So why clear cut? We know it's not a good thing. So why are we doing it? This again was from the textbook. I thought it was a good one. It had the advantages of clear cutting. Well, you get a ton of wood and it's worth money, right? There's an economic incentive. It also produces products we want, right? So you get a higher timber yield, I mean you get a lot of tree per area. That's maximizing your profits in a short time. You cut them down, you sell them, right? You can replant with what are called fast growing trees to get that going. It doesn't take any skill. Like the people working for you, they don't need to know like, well, I can cut down this tree, but not that tree. They don't need to know that because they're just cutting them all down, right? So it's really that economic advantage, right? And we've already mentioned the disadvantages over here on the right, right? Disrupts ecosystems, reduces biodiversity. If fragments of habitat, if you destroy one part of the forest and there's another part intact, well, that part that's intact, it can't get across because that part of the forest is destroyed. So, it creates that flooding, that erosion. So, and who wants to go to an area that's clear cut? I think that was kind of interesting. You don't want to camp in a clear cut area. So there's always give and take, but there's a reason why we do it, mainly economic. So causes, you might think, well, no, duh, we cut down trees because we use them. But there's kind of some more specifics here that I want us to look at. And I broke it into, I guess, two categories. I put deforestation, one problem, two different stories. In a highly developed country like Western Europe, like the United States, Japan, we're cutting down trees for different reasons than, say, in less developed countries. In countries like Brazil or a lot of countries in Africa, there's different reasons. So here in the United States, for instance, we're cutting down trees, economic, right? Products. I want paper, I want pencils, I want to build a new house, I want a new table, right? So there's an economic incentive for companies to cut down trees and make those products for me because I want them. And that even ties into affluence. Sort of affluence, right? Money, wealth. I've got the money to buy those things. And then in the United States, I did put this, we have more managed forests. There is some government oversight. There's some private ownership of land, and that land is managed. So that was maybe a little different. And then how is that different? Well, in less developed countries, say like a lot of countries in Africa or say Brazil, people are cutting down the forest, remember, to grow food. They cut down the trees. Nobody owns the forest. They can go in at their own, will, cut down the forest. Well, they don't have any money for fertilizer, so they burn the trees. That adds nutrients to the soil. After a few years, the soil is depleted, so they go deeper into the forest, cut down a new plot of land, burn those trees. So it is for food. They may even gather food in the forest, but mainly it's for that kind of subsistence agriculture. We often call it slash and burn. Fuel wood. So biomass is the fancy word for this kind of energy source. Bio means living, the mass of living things. So a tree is a living thing. So if I go into a forest, I cut down the trees, well, I can haul that back to my house. I can use it to cook food. I can use it to heat my home. So it actually is an energy source. It can also be converted into charcoal. I have a little picture of that later. You basically kind of slow burn, kind of smolder the wood to get rid of the water, and it kind of compacts into charcoal, and people can use that to heat their homes or cook their food. In some countries, poverty, in less developed countries, there's a lot of poverty. And so you don't have electricity running to your house. You don't have, if you did, you wouldn't have money for it. You're not living in that kind of home. So you need to cut down trees to cook your food or heat your home because you have no other options. Debt repayment. Some less developed countries are trying to pay off, like we have our national debt. They're trying to pay off a national debt. So they cut down trees to raise livestock, or maybe they cut down trees to plant coffee or some cash crop that they can then export and use to pay down debt. So deforestation is the same problem, clear cutting, but kind of two different stories depending on the economic levels of a country. So I put deforestation in highly developed countries. Here, I'm mainly going to focus on the United States. And I want to put these maps up. I thought this was interesting. If you look, coniferous forests are pine tree forests, basically, right? Pine trees. And if you look, coniferous means cone bearing, right? Pine trees. If you look, these are for the most part, right? Highly developed countries. We've got Canada, we've got United States, we've got Western Europe. And so in most developed countries, it's the coniferous forests that we're cutting down, as well as the temperate deciduous forest. So kind of seasonal deciduous means the trees lose their leaves in the fall. They come back in the spring and the summer. And again, if you look, it's really kind of United States, Western Europe, kind of Japan, like it really is developed countries. So most highly developed countries are cutting down pine trees, coniferous trees, and deciduous trees would be like oak, maple, hickory, trees like that. So that was kind of an interesting thing to point out. And in highly developed countries, like we said, we're cutting them down to build homes. We're cutting them down for mining, to graze livestock, maybe. We're cutting them down for products, things we want, right? Resources. There is government management of our forest resources. So we do have national forests, and they're managed by the government. Forests can be privately owned. That does lead to some controversy. Some people argue if it's an old forest, do they have the right to cut it down even if they own the property? So some argument there, but forests are a little bit more controlled, I would say, in highly developed countries versus less developed countries. Not just exciting, but deforestation in the United States, and most of it occurred really prior to the 1800s, if you think about it, I guess it makes sense. Or I guess in the 1800s, I should say, in the 1800s. If you think about it, it makes sense because that whole manifest destiny, use everything we got to, build our country. So there wasn't really concern about resources other than how they could benefit us. And so I thought this kind of fit with the United States. It's about logging in national forests. Kind of again, why are we doing it? Kind of what are the benefits and the disadvantages? All right. What about in less developed countries? In less developed countries, so a little bit different what's going on. And first big difference, if you look, it's usually tropical rainforests. So in less developed countries, right? Think about these are all countries in Africa are generally less developed. A lot of less developed, kind of mid-range developed countries in South America. So in these places, we're finding where you find a tropical rainforest are usually less developed countries. I think that's important why tropical rainforests are being cut down, and the reasons are a little different. So less developed countries, right, where you have the Congo, South American tropical rainforests, right? They're all tropical. And the big one is this fuel, wood, and charcoal. They're cutting down the trees to heat their home and cook their food, right? They're cutting down trees for grazing livestock and for agriculture. That's slash and burn, right? They're cutting down the trees, burning them so they can grow food. They are being exploited to some degree for gold, oil, some mineral and energy resources. Often they're being exploited by companies coming in from highly developed countries and exploiting these resources. Again, I should put that one above, but shifting agriculture, that's slash and burn. Their population is increasing very rapidly. They need food. They don't have access to food. There's a lot of poverty. So again, slash and burn. The forest lands do produce a lot of things for export. So again, maybe there's some corporations, even from highly developed countries, coming in and exploiting that. And sometimes even the governments are unstable. And so they'll be rubber plantations and they'll export that for money. And so there's, like I said, in less developed countries, it's generally tropical rainforests. And the reason they're being deforested is kind of different than what we find in highly developed countries. This, to me, is more about survival. I don't know what's going on in less developed countries, as well as poverty and unstable governments. I did want you guys to see this. A lot of times when we think of charcoal, we think of barbecuing. And that's a little bit different. If you look, you can really see, and I have some at school, but if you look here, can you see it kind of looks like a tree? Can you see like tree barkish? Kind of, not the best English word, but basically what they do, they cut down the tree, they put it in a pit and kind of slow burn, like kind of smolder, and then they will put that out, and it basically has gotten rid of all the water. It kind of compacts the wood. So it's still wood. It's just been converted into kind of like a less water, kind of charcoal it's called, and they can sell that. It's quite a trade, I guess, in charcoal. It's the way that some people in less developed countries actually make money. Not a ton, but how they can make money. So cutting down the rainforest gives people in poverty some income that they desperately need. There's a lot of gold mining. I know in South America it's become quite actually an issue. Even a lot of deaths, a lot of killings have been going on. It's pretty sad. A lot of exploitation of native peoples even. There's a lot of mineral resources, particularly I think I know South America and even the Congo. So the forest is being destroyed for that purpose. I thought this was it's from your book actually. And look, these are direct causes like drilling for oil, mining for gold, tree plantations for export, cutting down the forests for growing livestock and all of that. Those are direct causes for tropical rainforest deforestation. But really underneath poverty, oops, I meant to circle it, not cross it out, poverty, corrupt governments, having to export products to pay debt down, those really are the underlying causes. So when you think of solutions, sometimes it's really getting at poverty, it's getting at government corruption. That maybe would really be the answer. Forest management and protection in the United States, we do offer some protection to our forests. The Endangered Species Act. Sometimes like, well, there can be some plants and trees that are endangered, certainly. But what seems to be the case, there's a bird called the marbled marlet, more in the 80s, and then something, an owl, the spotted owl. Both of these birds, the marbled marlet was in Northern California, the spotted owl in Washington State, they were put on the endangered species list. Well, after that happens, their habitat is protected. So ecologists were able to prove that the forest was critical to their recovery and their survival, so then the forest is protected. So often the Endangered Species Act can lead to protection of entire ecosystems or forest habitats. So that's one area of protection, at least in the United States. In the United States, we do have public lands. We've got national forests, national parks, national wildlife refuges, and those could or do protect forested land. They're paid for with federal tax dollars, right? We pay taxes. That goes into managing and protecting these lands. These lands are about what's called conservation. So we can use them. So I can go and hike in a national park. I can camp there. I can use it, but we have to use it wisely. So it's not preservation. Preservation means you don't use something at all. It's completely protected. National parks and forests are more about using them, but using them wisely. It's called multiple use. There's a multiple use yield act, it's called. We can use national parks, let's say, for multiple things, education, recreation, but we do offer it some protection. We're not going to deforest a national park. So the government, federal government does have these public lands and we protect them. So there's some forests protected that way. I did add a little bit here. Do you want to read them over about the difference? I don't know if you are aware, but national parks, right? Many of you, Yosemite's a national park. Some things are prohibited, but you can camp there, you can hike there, there's educational programs there, but no, hunting, logging, those things are prohibited. A national wilderness, these are mainly in Alaska, and a national wilderness is given the highest level of protection. A national wilderness is generally an area that there's not roads into it, things like that. It's given much more protection. It's mainly in Alaska, but there's a lot of forest protected under national wilderness. So unlike national parks, there is some hunting, but they prohibit even motorized vehicles, so there's no roads or anything like that. So a lot of forest in Alaska is protected as national wilderness. Unless I put national forest, we do have national forests. If you've ever been up through Coarse Gold to Oakhurst to Yosemite through the south entrance, Yosemite is a national park, but prior to getting there, you're going through a national forest. This is interesting. The national forest is the only one of those public lands, instead of under the Department of the Interior, it's under the Department of Agriculture. So national forests are managed a little differently. They're managed a little more like cropland. So the Forest Service was created to regulate these forests, but unlike national parks and national wilderness, they are open to logging, to livestock. There's much less conservation here. They're used more like an agricultural land would be used. So it happened back in the day. This Gifford Pinchot, he really said that he got the National Forest into the Department of Agriculture and said, let's use these trees. So they're forests and they have some protection, but it's really about using them like we would corn. We can use forests more sustainably, right? If we focus on why are they important ecologically? Maybe we harvest them no faster than they can be replenished. That's selective cutting or sustainability. We protect really vulnerable areas. They say we use less virgin timber, new trees. We basically recycle paper, reuse things. So there are some basic solutions. This was a nice list in the book. I put a little star on this one. I didn't know where to fit this in, but the College Board wanted us to mention that, at least in the United States, we use that integrated pest management to protect trees. I know it's kind of random here, but I just thought it fits. But another way to protect forests is through making sure they're not being harmed by invasive species, species that were brought in from somewhere else that then compete with the natives, and that would harm the forest. Or there's something called the gypsy moth, and these things eat the leaves of trees just till there are no leaves left. They call it defoliation. So we're using different kinds of management, maybe some pesticides mixed with traps, mixed with, we bring over the predator of the gypsy moth. to manage them, and that would help keep our forests healthy as well. All right, so the last little bit here, what about tropical rainforests? How do we protect them? Here in the United States, we can have legislation, we can do some of those things. We have the Department of the Interior, they're looking out for forests. But what about in these less developed countries? How do we protect these tropical rainforests? So how would protecting tropical rainforests, which are mainly less developed countries, be different than, say, in developed countries? So I said here, we can pass laws. Maybe we have much more of a voice in the government, I like to think. So we can do some things to protect our forest. But what about in tropical rainforest, less developed countries? Right? There's corrupt government, there's poverty. People are just trying to feed themselves. They can't be always so concerned with, what's going on in the tropical rainforest. How would protect tropical rainforest be different? It's very difficult. I just, want to be honest, it's incredibly difficult when there's poverty, unstable governments, and a growing population. It is very difficult. There are some solutions, however. These were in the textbook, some things that we could do as far as like providing subsidies or money, trying to help people in poverty get what they need, maybe food or jobs, get what they need so they do not need to cut down the forest. Those kinds of things. Try to reduce illegal cutting by helping people in poverty. Right? So some things we can do. You can reforest areas. This is in the textbook. The page is down on the bottom. Some people argue this is like the future hypothesis, like what would work, this model biosphere. If we could get in these less developed countries people into what's called ecotourism, where you take people, pay for adventures, in nature. If we could promote that, you could create sort of a core area in the middle where it's left wholly intact. You don't cut down trees, you don't build roads, you just let nature do its thing. And then going outwards, you slowly maybe have a little bit of a buffer zone, and then cities, where people live. So it's kind of trying to keep people out of that core area. Then you would also have some tourism that might bring some money into the area, so people are living in less poverty. Some ideas, and this is also in your book. All right, I did release in the AP Classroom, it's the Unit 4 free response question 1, parts B and C, and then Unit 5 FRQ, question 1, parts A through C. Excellent questions about forest management and deforestation, so definitely check those out. The Advanced Placement YouTube channel has some great videos about forest management. I linked them in the forest management and deforestation playlist, so check them out. Thanks for sticking with me. It was a long one.